There are a lot of things that a dungeon master can do to change up their game, whether they hope to adjust the balance and the challenge level, or tell a different kind of story, or just provide interest and variety by trying something new to have more fun. There's a few aspects of the game where a small change can make a huge impact, but I think the most significant one by far is very likely the rest mechanics. Rests are a fundamental part of D&D gameplay, and changing how they work changes the whole feel of the game. Using a variant or a homebrew rule can fix some big issues that a lot of tables experience, create a different kind of pacing and rhythm for like certain sessions or campaign arcs, or even open up whole new ways to play this incredible game, even to the point of making it easier to bring more players into this hobby and mint more dungeon masters. Short rests and long rests are how the characters get their resources back, and while D&D is many things to many people, one of the core things it is designed to be is a game about resource management. That is a cornerstone of how adventures are laid out and character classes are designed, and the narrative pacing of the stories we tell, and the way the rules are laid out makes certain assumptions that are not in line with the way the game is actually played at a lot of tables. We talked about how having one or two encounters per long rest can make things feel way too easy and creates a big gap in the effectiveness of certain classes in that last video, and we went over a bunch of different strategies you can employ to address that problem. So definitely check that out after this one if you haven't already, and as long as we're talking about clicking stuff, make sure you like and subscribe, of course, feed that algorithmic beast, and commenting is also super helpful in that regard, but it can also help the other folks watching this to, share your insights and experiences, and I am all about that. I'm not the only one here with good ideas, so please share away. And like we said, there's different ways to do it, but changing the way rests work can simply solve a lot of problems with the adventuring day. It can also create whole new modes of play and get D&D doing things you didn't know it could. So let's quickly review. Rules is written: a short rest takes 1 hour and lets you roll up some hit dice. A long rest takes 8 hours and restores pretty much everything a player character's got, including abilities, spells, and all of their HP. The main exception is a long rest only restores up to half of your total hit dice. This is an elegant design if the party is having a 6 to 8 encounter adventuring day, taking a couple short rests as they go, and having a long rest every night, but that's not how most of us play the game. I mentioned a poll last time where 90% of tables are under 5 encounters a day, and a lot of them are 1 or 2. I did another one, and it looks like half of us take a short rest less than 25% of the time, and many not at all. Now, half of us not using a core mechanic of the game is a lot, but honestly, I expected it to be way worse than this 50-50 split. I've had experienced players at my table who didn't really know what hit dice were even for beyond, rolling HP when you level up. This doesn't just affect the balance in the characters versus the monsters, it affects the balance between the characters as well. Some abilities come back on a short rest, and some classes like monks and warlocks and fighters are considered short rest classes because they get pretty much all of their abilities back on a short rest. You might see already some of these are lesser regarded classes balance-wise compared to long rest classes like wizards and clerics, and yeah, there's arcane recovery and a question which camp rangers go in, kind of the middle maybe, but the fact is, one factor in certain classes underperforming compared to others is that there are a lot of tables out there that are never taking short rests. If I've got survivability, right, and can do my bread and butter abilities all day, while you are a glass cannon who can go supernova once or twice a day, that's a fair balance that leads to an interesting team strategy, unless we only fight once or twice per day, and we're always getting all of our hit points back whenever we want to. So one very easy way to change things is to make short rests more appealing by making them shorter. In the real world, the difference between a lunch hour and a full night's sleep is huge, but in-game it often feels like the characters can afford to take an hour off without the world ending, so they can probably squeeze in a long rest as well, right? And then everybody gets all their health and spell slots back. Making short rests shorter fixes a lot of that in my experience. I like taking 20 because it's a D20 based game, but you could even say it takes 10 minutes to, take a little breather, bandage up, have a little snack, roll some hit dice, short rest abilities come back, and you're on your way. Now, some folks out there might not be comfortable changing something as core as the rest mechanic. I know a lot of you are down to experiment and change anything, but when you don't have a ton of experience under your belt, it's understandable to be cautious about making changes and not wanting going to ruin the fun for your players. So let's keep it official for now, and I'll show you a couple other ways you can change how rests work that are written in the book and definitely are worth considering in their own right. Plus, knowing about these options might make you more comfortable trying out mine or even one of your own. Dungeon Master's Guide, page 267, gives us a few ways to change resting that will have a big impact on how the game runs and feels. There's a lot of good stuff in the DMG. I made a video about a bunch of hidden gems here. I'll put a link to that and an affiliate link if you don't have a copy yet down in the description. I know a lot of what's in this book will still be useful even when there's a new edition out, and I'm not sure how true that will be for most of the other 5 ebooks, unfortunately. The first one here is under the heading of healing, but it's still connected to this conversation. Slow, natural healing. Characters don't regain hit points at the end of a long rest. Instead, a character can spend hit dice to heal at the end of a long rest, just as with the short rest. This optional rule prolongs the amount of time that characters need to recover from their wounds without the benefits of magical healing and works well for grittier, more realistic campaigns. This does a lot of things. Out of the gate, it makes hit dice relevant again if you're not taking short rests. It also gets rid of that super dissatisfying narrative that comes up so often when a character or a bunch of characters were on death's doorstep, right? Maybe even they crossed the threshold and then, hey, they're back the next day, fully healed up and ready to go. Didn't you get burnt to a cinder by that dragon last night? Nothing a night's rest can't fix. It's a heroic fantasy game, but still, slow, natural healing makes recovery just a little bit more reasonable. And I'll also say it doesn't have to be all or nothing with these variant rules. Maybe you don't want to always play like this, but some curse or disease, perhaps adventuring in another plane or like specific environment could impose slow, natural healing for a few sessions to make things challenging. This gets harder and harder at higher levels, so remember you can pull a Kobayashi Maru sometimes and change the conditions of the test. Now, by that same measure, it's worth mentioning epic heroism, which cranks all the dials in the other direction. Short rest is a minute, long rest is an hour. Imagine the craziness you could throw out the party if you decided some god came and made those the rules for this segment of the adventure. Could be fun, but I think we're trying to correct things on the other direction, which brings me to my favorite option here, gritty realism. Now, I don't love the name gritty realism. Well, scratch that. I do like the name gritty realism, but I don't think it is the best name for this particular optional rule. To me, gritty realism would be combining this rule with slow natural healing and also probably like encumbrance and rations and ammo tracking and torch time counting, all of that. Old school D&D, essentially. Speaking of, did you know that back in the day, there was only one kind of rest? It took 24 hours to complete, and you got 1 hit point back, just in case any of this feels a little too draconian. Okay, so even if it sounds like it means something else, what is gritty realism in the DMG? This variant rule uses a short rest of 8 hours and a long rest of 7 days. This puts the brakes on the campaign, requiring the players to carefully judge the benefits and drawbacks of combat. Characters can't afford to engage in too many battles in a row, and all adventuring requires careful planning. This approach encourages the characters to spend time out of the dungeon. It's a good option for campaigns that influence intrigue, politics, and interaction among other NPCs, and in which combat is rare or something to be avoided rather than rushed into. Now that is going to fundamentally shift the way we approach this game. Short rest classes are going to get a tremendous boost, and long rest classes are going to have to be cautious again about using their big abilities. As it says in the rules, this is also a great way to mechanically disincentivize a hack and slash style of play. In theory, combat should be about 1/3 of the game, while exploration and the social side of play should make up the rest. This can also really stretch out the story and give it time to breathe, and that's not what you're looking for in every plot, but so many adventurers go from level 1 rat catchers to ridiculously powerful demigods in like the span of a few weeks. It raises some questions, doesn't it? And if we can enact gritty realism, we can also start tracking time the way the original version of the game suggests. If we take 1 long rest per session and play it once per week, we can just leave the game clock running to match the real world world calendar, and all sorts of interesting things happen. We get a story with way more scope. Everyone is equipped to know the answer, how long ago was that? We can bring in the seasons and their effects more. This is also a great way to make space for downtime in the game. Now, admittedly, the official support for downtime is a little lackluster, and maybe we'll make a video on it one day, but if you've got a group that is interested in incorporating crafting or like running a business or building a stronghold and recruiting followers, whatever, having a built-in week off from adventuring every so often just sets the stage for them. And again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Just like there might come a time where you want to turn on epic heroism, right? You could also treat gritty realism as situational. Maybe in the thick of dungeon delving, the game works the usual way, but while traveling through the wilderness, the idea is your night camping counts as a short rest, and it takes a whole week off to get everything back, a la a long rest. This might sound bananas now, but the OG rules had you literally go play an entirely different game to handle this journey to and from the dungeon. So you can alter the rules a little bit for these different phases of the game. And now a random encounter while traveling is not a trivial thing that you can just blow all your abilities on. You've got to be strategic and maybe not default to combat right away. Maybe we want to make an arrangement with the lizard folk whose territory we have to pass through, because we can't just easily kill all of them. My favorite rest variant is not in the Dungeon Master's Guide or the Player's Handbook. I'd love to take credit for it, but I think a lot of us who spend time thinking about these things have come up with the idea. I've invented it and reinvented it a few different ways myself, and I've seen a lot of people out there express their own versions. Maybe there is some original progenitor of the concept somewhere in TTRPGs, but I think it might just be from video games having save points. In D&D, I like calling them safe havens. Basically, the characters can only gain the benefits of a long rest in a certain place or under a certain set of circumstances. Renting a room in the tavern is the obvious example. It makes sense that you are going to get a better night's sleep in a hotel somewhere than camping in the woods, especially when you constantly have to be on guard for dangerous beasts and worse monstrosities. I don't care how much of a grizzled loner your character who gives 0 Fs is, they're not getting the same quality of rest in the abomination-filled dungeon than they do in their stronghold. And this idea gives the Dungeon Master a ton of control over how the party can take a long rest without imposing huge changes to the core mechanics of the game. It also potentially creates incentives for the characters to explore and establish waypoints in the world where they can rest peacefully. Maybe they form an alliance with a faction of dungeon denizens who can provide them with a safe harbor, or to even fix up locations that they have cleared in order to make them like viable home bases. Now we're talking about strongholds, plural, and to almost every adventure we're adding an additional hook or goal to like establish a foothold in some new territory to keep us from having to constantly travel back to town. While securing or unlocking waypoints sounds awesome, having only one safe haven, whether it is, the keep on the borderlands or the starting town or the character's home base in the city, and laying out the expectation that they have to go adventuring and then make it back to their sanctuary by the end of the session unlocks some awesome features and can get you playing Dungeons and Dragons in a whole other way. First, we'll get those same calendar and downtime benefits that we gained with gritty realism. But if we always start and end our sessions in the same place, we don't need the same group of characters setting out each time. When a player can't make it, we don't have to worry about what to do with their character or explain why they're not there. And if a player can only commit to coming around half of the time because of, scheduling and real-world obligations, now it's way easier to include them in our group. And now we're getting into the real exciting stuff for me. A player doesn't have to play the same character every time. We can have an ever-changing stable of characters going on these adventures. We could even have an ever-changing stable of players coming to game night. This simple little hack can turn your home game into a massive multiplayer open-world RPG that makes it easy to bring in new players and mint new dungeon masters and get everybody playing more D&D. If you want to learn how, tune in next time where we'll dive headfirst into these ideas. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it, or come join us on Patreon and get early access and some other great benefits. Thanks so much for watching. Get out there, have fun, be kind to yourself and each other by getting your rest, and I will see you next time. Bye.